Hello, I will be reading Chapter 5 of The Journey Back. If you are not the biggest fan of how I read the books, that is perfectly fine. You can just mute me and read on your own. Alright, so we start. Mile marker 72. Out on the highway, I got the truck rolling. In hardly no time, I was in ninth gear and cruising along at 55 miles an hour. Seemed a little fast, though, so I eased up and downshifted once. But mostly for practice. Boy, I was really in trouble now, I thought. Breaking out of prison and then stealing a truck? I smiled when I thought about it. Yeah. But it wasn't 'cause I was evil or anything. I hadn't hurt anyone, so I figured I might as well enjoy the ride. On the console, I noticed two things I'd passed over earlier. A pack of gum and a red Southern States cap. I didn't want anyone to look in my window and realize it was a kid driving. So I slapped the cap on my head right away. Then I took a piece of gum, unwrapped it with one hand, and pushed it into my mouth. Weren't too many cars in the road, so I took my time and kept glancing at the dashboard to familiarize myself with it again. It was a dizzying array of dials and gauges. Some I could remember what they were, like the air pressure gauges. They were important because, like I said, those brakes run on air, and you need to know what kind of pressure you had. I also knew about the RPM, the revolutions per minute, that the motor was making. The faster you went, the higher the RPM. You had to keep an eye on that because you could burn things up if the RPM got too high. I checked out the fuel gauge too to see how much gas I had. One tank was full, the other tank about half. Each tank carried about 120 gallons. When gas gets as high as $4 a gallon, it might cost pretty near $1,000 just to fill up the rig. No question I had plenty of gas to get me a good distance. But I was thinking I'd just go until I got to a city or a small town where I could park the truck and take off again. By then, the state police and everybody else would surely be on to all this. In fact, why didn't I check that out? Reaching up over the review mirror, I flipped on the CB radio and turned to channel 19, the trucker's channel. As a kid, riding with my dad, I loved listening to those guys chatter back and forth. First thing I heard on channel 19 made me tense up. Hey there, westbound. There's a Smokey ahead of you with a radar. A Smokey, that's a cop. And he had a speed radar out. I didn't know if that message was for me or not. Quite frankly, I didn't know if I was headed east or west, which was pretty important. But I didn't have a clue about the lay of the land out there in western Maryland. And even if there was a freaking GPS in the cab, I wouldn't have known how to use it. But just in case it was me headed toward that Smokey, I eased up on the accelerator so I wasn't exceeding the speed limit, which I guess was 55 or 60 miles an hour. For a long time, I chewed that gum hard and focused on driving that big rig. I finally saw a big sign that said I was headed east toward Frederick and Baltimore. Yes, I hissed to myself. That's the direction I wanted, east. I have to say, I was really enjoying that ride. I even thought that if I didn't become a Marine, that maybe one day I'd be a trucker instead because I like driving and I could be my own boss. You have to be 16 to get a Class B license to drive a truck, but that was only 2 years away from me. I even started wondering what I was hauling in that trailer behind me and whether it might be some kind of food and if there was any way I could get inside to take a look. I was going down and up and down some big hills and seeing lots of pretty open countryside with fields and stuff. I came to a town once, but I was going too fast and blew right by the exit ramp, so I just kept driving. I had to downshift some to slow her down and take some mean twists and turns through that town. Almost sideswiped a guy in a station wagon and nearly rammed into a bus that was going too slow. But all in all, I did pretty good. And let me tell you, driving that truck through traffic was better 100 times over than any video game I ever played in my life. Once I got outside of town on the open highway, I opened up and put some miles on that odometer. More big hills, then a mountain, Polish Mountain it was called. I wondered if that was some kind of joke. Only the sign for it looked legit. I dropped down to 6th gear and kept to the right lane, pulling 20 to 25 miles per hour up the entire incline. I cruised down the other side in the same gear, but with the brakes on too. Easy, I thought. I could do just about anything with this truck. The problem would be police after me as soon as that trucker got done eating his biscuits. When I spotted a police car traveling west, I got nervous and pushed my foot down on the accelerator. Then another mountain came. Again, I pulled into the far right lane to go slower and kept checking the rearview mirror. Something about the mountain seemed familiar, and when I got to the top, the Kenworth was really groaning by then. I realized it was Sidling Hill with the big cliffs and the colorful rock layers. I remembered that prison van driver talking about the marine fossils, and I couldn't help but turn my head to take a look. Sure enough, I could see the black stripe in the rock, and it made me wonder all over again how in the world this mountaintop could have been under the ocean. Seemed so upside down, I thought. Just like my life. I still held this against my mother, the fact that when I was only 9 years old, I was taking care of my brother almost all the time. Then my baby sister was born. I took care of them both, like I was their dad or something. I mean, I was fixing meals and changing diapers and putting those kids to bed, everything. And I was just a kid myself. The only times I got a break from it was when I was in school or working with my dad, or when I snuck out to be with my friends. Boy, I realized then I should have not let my mind wander like that because I was already starting down the other side of Sidling Hill way too fast. I slammed on the brakes and hoped I didn't jackknife, but nothing happened. The truck kept picking up more and more speed. Then I smelled burning rubber. My brakes were heating up. If the brakes got too hot, they'd fry themselves, even catch fire. I glanced at the temperature gauge for the rear axle and could see that it was already over 200, which meant trouble with a capital T. I sat up straight, my heart thumping high in my chest, and the palms of my hands sweating. I checked out the RPM to see if I could downshift to slow the truck, but I was already closing in at 2,000. Think about it this. A truck just idling is 800 RPM. Out on the highway, it was around 1,600. So when you get up to 2,000 RPM or more, you're going way too fast to downshift. You're redline. In other words, your ass is in the danger zone, big time. Faster and faster I went. My hands were gripped on the steering wheel so tight I didn't think I'd ever get them pried off. Both my feet were pressed down on the brake and I was praying too, which for me was just pressing my lips together and hardly breathing, because by then I could smell smoke. And when there's smoke, there's fire, right? My brakes were definitely burning. My heart beat triple time, but I was blanked out on what to do. I remembered my dad saying that in an emergency, he'd run the truck off the road and up an incline and let it fall over. But the only incline I saw was the one I was flying down. Both sides of the truck simply dropped off. So how would I stop? Would the truck launch into the air like a rocket and crash? Should I take it over the side so I didn't kill anybody else? What? I tried pumping the brakes, lifting both of my feet and then slamming them back down, but that didn't do squat. What else could I do? My eyes stretched wide as I stared at the road and the end of my life coming up fast and furious on the black pavement in front of me. In the opposite lane up ahead, 2 cars were slowly climbing the hill. Would they call someone? The police or 911? Could they tell I was in trouble? Did they even notice me? Probably not. To every driver I passed, I was probably just another annoying trucker, the guy they hated getting stuck behind. I was a blip out of the corner of their eyes, a big truck tumbling down Sidling Hill on Highway 68. Why should they take notice? Why bother if they're cruising along in their spiffy big SUV listening to music or chatting it up on your cell phone? And you know what? That reminded me of something. Not that I dwelled on it because my life was like hanging in the balance at the time, but I had this flash feeling that I'd been there before. Later, I realized why that not being noticed invisible feeling seemed familiar. It's because I've been in a million everyday places in my life, like the Food Lion or Wawa or the gas station with Mom, or even at school shooting the breeze with my friends, and I must have seemed like a pretty normal kid. A kid buying milk, pumping gas, laughing at a joke, when all the time what people saw was a shell. The outside of a kid who was totally different inside because he was holding stuff back to cover up the fact that he lived with a grizzly bear at home. Even my best friends didn't know my other life. I did my best to hide it, which is why they hardly ever came to my house. True, I was embarrassed that we didn't have a flush toilet that worked, that we had to use an outhouse, but more important, I didn't want them to see my mom and dad screaming at each other, or me getting my arm yanked out of my shoulder, or my head pushed into the wall. I didn't know when I figured it out, but it finally dawned on me one day how it wasn't normal for parents to beat on their kids the way my dad did to me. And I didn't want my parents to find out about it because I was afraid it would scare them off, and I didn't want to lose them. The word runaway flashed by. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to run away from home, only I didn't because Leanne and Hank, Mom too, and Grandpa. I was always afraid my father would get mad at Grandpa for helping us, and that he'd hurt him too. Runaway truck. Hey, did anyone care that I was about to die? Runaway truck ramp. Okay, yes, the sign said runaway truck ramp was coming up. 1/4 of a mile. Unfreaking believable. That's exactly what I needed. A gift from heaven if there ever was one. I came around a bend at 70, 80, maybe 100 miles an hour. I don't know. I didn't want to look. And the RPM had hit 2100. The smell of burning rubber was everywhere, and I knew fire was eating up the brakes, maybe even the rear axle. If oil leaked out the oil sear near the brakes, it would fuel the fire even more. At mile marker 72, some things you never forget, the runaway truck ramp came into view. I gritted my teeth and turned the steering wheel slightly to the right. Let me tell you, the truck shot down that ramp like a bat out of hell. At the far end, I could see how the ramp went uphill. I held tight to the steering wheel, and the truck stayed smack in the middle of the ramp, following the decline of the mountain. But soon, like maybe 300 feet, the entire rig sank into the thick bed of pea gravel, like a bowling ball rolled into a hole full of cotton. Amazing how the tractor trailer came to a complete stop in just seconds. Then, with a shudder and a quick jolt forward, it stalled out. I blew the air out of my cheeks and sat there, my eyes fixed straight ahead and my hands still glued to that steering wheel, but not for long. When I got my wits back, I sucked in my breath and got out of there fast. I didn't even turn around to see how much of the truck was on fire. I simply reached back into the sleeper to grab the blanket and yanked the trucker's gray jacket off a hook. And then I kicked open the door, spit out my gum, and took off. And that's the end of chapter 5 of The Journey Back.